Hello and welcome along to the latest episode of the Manchester is Red podcast from the Manchester Evening News. I'm today's host, George Smith. I'm delighted to be joined by Steven Railston. Steven, we're going to look back on this episode of Manchester United's 2-0 defeat to Arsenal on Wednesday night and look ahead to tomorrow's Saturday's clash with Nottingham Forest at Old Trafford. But before we look at the football, we first want to pay our respects and tribute to Kath Phipps, who sadly passed away this week. Her death was announced by Manchester United on Thursday. She's died at the age of 85, and anybody who supports Manchester United knows all about Kath Phipps and what a wonderful lady that she was. She was the beating heart and soul of that football club. She was the face that greeted almost everybody when they first arrived at Carrington, and you only have to tell with the amount of tributes that have poured in over the last sort of 24 hours to realise just how special a figure she was. Steven, you were across this story yesterday. Very, very sad news for everybody associated with the football club.
Just very, very sad when you get a text like that, a bit of notice from the club. Obviously, you just look at it and think, oh no. A wonderful woman. She was a famous face at Carrington. I had the privilege of meeting her a few times, sitting in the reception and waiting to interview people. She joined the club in the late 60s. She'd seen it all. She'd won the lot, quite literally. She saw the triumphs of Sir Matt Busby, Sir Alex Ferguson, and she was never present throughout all the older decades. So incredibly sad news, George, to come out of the club yesterday. We're obviously recording on Friday. And as you say, I think the tributes just speak volumes, don't they? There's been an outpouring of love to Kath, who, I mean, many supporters will know as Kath from reception, but she had various different roles throughout her time at the club. But yeah, a fantastic woman, really sad news, and I think we'll all agree, if everyone from the MEN sends our condolences to our family at this difficult time.
Absolutely, and over 55 years worth of service, it's a remarkable feat for anybody to achieve, and the amount of things that she's seen at that football club, she would have had so many stories to tell. And as Steven quite rightly says, our thoughts with her family and friends at this difficult time, and we wish them all the very best. But Steven, moving on to the football now and looking back on that game at the Emirates on Wednesday night, it was Ruben Amorim's first defeat as Manchester United head coach. It was a result a lot of us probably saw coming. We all said in the build-up United went to the capital as underdogs. But having said that, they defended pretty well in the first half. They made a good fist of it, albeit didn't offer much in the final third. But first half, I thought they defended very, very well. They knocked the ball around quite confidently. And even though the result wasn't what United wanted, there was sort of elements and a platform for Ruben Amorim to build on. You saw what he wanted to do ultimately.
Well, we saw that in all four of the games, which has been obviously very refreshing. We saw that in his first game in charge against Ipswich, down at Portman Road, where there's actually an identity now, which has been good to see. Amorim said the storm was coming. I don't know if this was a storm. It might have been a gust of wind down at the Emirates, because Arsenal weren't very good in the first half. United defended brilliantly. They were brave. They were aggressive in their pressing. They stuck together. They were making the spaces really tight, and they really didn't give Arsenal much of a sniff in that first half. However, having said that, there wasn't much threat going forward. Obviously, that chance fell to Dalot, didn't it, towards the end of the first half? And if he puts that in, it might have been a slightly different game, giving United something to hang on to. But you always felt at half-time that Arsenal were going to come out in the second half and win that game, realistically. And that's exactly what they did. Of course, it's disappointing to concede from any set piece, never mind two set pieces. And I think when you do concede from set pieces, you think, well, that could have been avoided. It's interesting when you look back at those corners, because you can kind of analyse Andrew Onana's position and you can question whether he should have done better. But I just think the deliveries are that high quality. I just think it makes it so hard to stop. I've watched it a few times now. I mean, Declan Rice and Bukayo Saka, their deliveries into the box are genuinely world class. They've got the most assists from set pieces in the Premier League this season. Arsenal have the best record from set pieces in the Premier League again this season. They're like Stoke City on steroids. They're incredible from set pieces, Arsenal, and it's been a huge part of their success, and that was decisive on Wednesday night at the Emirates. That's what won Arsenal the game. So yeah, the second half was disappointing. It was very frustrating to see that. And Arsenal were deserving winners in the end.
They were, but I honestly think, and like you said there, that we've seen signs of an identity in these first four games of the Amorim era. And I particularly thought, watching the game on Wednesday night, there wasn't an awful lot in it between both boxes. United defended well, as you said, in the first half. Arsenal did have a chance, but United kept them at bay. second half. 2 corners have got the job done, as you've quite rightly mentioned there. But we're going to sort of talk about it, and it's going to be a running theme for God knows how long. It has been a running theme for God knows how long. United's attacking output, even though they scored 4 at the weekend, an XG on Wednesday night of 0.22. It just highlights where the issues are and what the problem is. We all know United need a more experienced, more established number 9. They don't come cheaply. So it is for Ruben Amorim now just about finding that element and sort of the potion he needs inside the final third ultimately to get this United team clicking.
Yeah, and I felt really sorry for Rasmus Højlund, to be honest. They had a thankless task leading that attack on Wednesday night. He was isolated, he was doing all the donkey work, doing the running from the front and trying to press, but he never really had a chance, did he? He never had a sniff, never had an opportunity. And United are struggling to create in those moments. And I think the sign of a really good team is winning when you probably haven't played your best, and that's what Arsenal did. They found a way to win. It was interesting that Carlos Fernandes was on the touchline again, looking after the set pieces. Fernandes was obviously brought to the club from Sporting Lisbon. He's Ruben Amorim's right-hand man, his assistant coach, and he's now looking after set pieces. Amorim spoke about that in his press conference after the game and confirmed that now he's got that responsibility, because Andreas Jorgensen had it. He joined the club in the summer. He was a Jason Wilcox appointment. He was retained on Amorim's staff following Eric Ten Hag's sacking. So it's interesting how that's developed. I think it's more of a collaborative process now with Jorgensen and Fernandes, from what we've been told anyways. And they've give them food for thought on defending set pieces, because United have actually practiced defending set pieces in the warm-up before each game, I believe. I was obviously at the Everton game, at the Ipswich game, wasn't at Arsenal on Wednesday night. It was Ty and Samuel, but I'm pretty sure Ty tweeted that they were, again, trying to work out in warm-ups, right, how we're going to deal with this. It didn't pay dividends in that second half, but as I say, Arsenal are just that good from set pieces. I just think it's so hard to stop.
It is, and sometimes you've simply got to give the opposition credit, haven't you? You've mentioned there the quality of the deliveries of Declan Rice and Bukayo Saka, and Nicolas Javert, Arsenal set-piece coach, seems to be the king of finding a way to score from these dead ball situations. But I think United, even though obviously, as we've said, the result wasn't what they wanted at the Emirates, they could take positives from it between both boxes, I've said. But again, and you've also got to caveat the fact that Arsenal, as much as it pains United fans to think it, Arsenal are currently light years ahead of United. They've got a better team. They've got a better structure in place. They're further along this project that United want to go along. But it's another bad result, not necessarily a bad result, a negative result against one of their traditional Big Six rivals away from home. It's been an ongoing issue for the last couple of years. But ultimately, until you carry that potent threat inside the final third, you're not going to break down that barrier.
Yeah, it's a reality check, isn't it? This is where we are, and this is where we'd like to go. And it's going to take time, of course it is. Amorim said that himself. This is a project, and I know kind of supporters get tired of hearing that word, because every couple of years a manager comes in and they're sold another project, but that's exactly what it is, and you'll need patience and time. Like you said, there was a few positives. I really feared the worst when it was confirmed that Malacia would be starting at left wing back up against the most informed winger in the league in Saka. But to be fair to Malacia, he did incredibly well, I thought, in that first half. Actually proved me wrong. Before that, he played against Huddersfield for the under-21s. I was at that game as well, and then obviously he played against Bodo Glimt. He was brought off at half time. So with those 2 appearances under his belt, you did fear the worst, but he emerged with a lot of credit. He was obviously brought off at half time. He was on a booking, so whether or not that was pre-planned or the booking came into that, we don't know. And we need to talk about Lenny Yoro, I guess, as well, don't we? Because he came on in the second half. Amorim made multiple changes. It was a really classy cameo. He's like a Rolls Royce of a player, isn't he? I thought that in pre-season, but you can kind of sense his quality just from watching him and the little bits that we've seen. Unfortunately, we've not had a chance to see a lot of Yoro yet, because he fractured his metatarsal in pre-season, of course. But he's a really exciting player. There was a moment when Trossard burst into the box, and Yoro just kind of bided his time, waited for the right moment, and struck with, it was almost like an extended leg. He's got very kind of gangly legs, doesn't he, his frame? But it was a really good challenge, timed it perfectly, and it was another example of his quality. So look, he's back in the squad. That's a timely boost ahead of a winter schedule. So that was another positive on a disappointing night, because when you get beat off Arsenal, there's always a traditional rivalry there. It's never nice, especially for the fans who have trekked down to London for 8:15 kickoff time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also thought, personally, Mason Mount did pretty well again out of possession. He pressed high up the pitch, does what he does. And I thought Ahmad was sprightly when he came off the bench. Again,
He should have started Ahmad, shouldn't he, really?
I agree. I expected him to start after the way he'd performed at the weekend against Everton. Obviously, getting a couple of assists had a key hand in the second goal, which Fernandes claimed the assist for. But again, it was his anticipation when he nicked past Zinchenko in the second half on Wednesday night, where you looked at me and thought, this young man is destined for the top, and he's getting better and better, isn't he? And he is fast becoming the United winger that we've grown up sort of wanting to see in terms of a United winger being excited and anticipating getting bums off seats. That's exactly what he is.
And it doesn't make sense when you look back, and Anthony was getting picked over him, or when Ten Hag put Anthony on the pitch against Fenerbahce, and obviously Ahmad eventually came on, but those decisions were just nonsensical, really, and no one wants to keep harping on back to Ten Hag, but it does make it incredible when you've watched Ahmad this season and you do think about that. Yeah, he's been fantastic, and it's a credit to himself that in the last 4 games he's really took to that wing back role, because Amrim talked about players kind of adapting in a period of learning the role, and they're going to need time in the training ground, but some of them will make these kind of seamless transitions into those roles, and you've got to really load those players. You can give them a lot of credit, and Ahmad's done that. He looks really comfortable in that right wing back role, and he made such an impact, didn't he, when he came on. And yeah, going forward, I mean, he's kind of got that position locked down, I believe.
Yeah, I agree, and seamless was the word I was going to use. He has made the transition look very, very easy indeed. But Stephen, before we move on from part 1, 4 games into the Amrim era, 2 wins, a draw and a defeat. It's featured a little bit of everything. There was obviously a really convincing win against Everton in terms of the scoreline. Underwhelming result against Arsenal, but to be expected for the position United currently find themselves in. I think Ruben Amorim, deep down, will probably be quite satisfied with the start he's made in terms of the identity that he's wanted to see. You mentioned it right at the beginning of the show, that the identity is what he wanted to introduce, and there's been clear signs of that in all 4 games so far.
Yeah, and it's funny, isn't it? It's becoming Amrim roulette. His changes are becoming synonymous with his managerial approach already. 6 changes it was on Wednesday night. A lot of changes. And you think back to last season, the amount of injuries that they had. Ten Hag like to keep and play with a settled team. And I think we as journalists quite like that as well, because before a game it's easy to predict. But Amrim's teams have been impossible to predict, haven't they? And he's insisting on rotating his squad and using everyone. We saw that with Mount coming in the side, obviously, again. Malacia being given a chance when probably not many people would have started him against Arsenal. So it's been refreshing to see. And if he can kind of progress through the next few weeks and keep doing that while getting results, that'll be very impressive. And that's going to be the difficulty, the challenge ahead for Amrim, really. But some really good stuff from his first few weeks. I thought it was always going to be difficult. You know, he inherited a struggling team, a team low on confidence, a team that was 13th in the Premier League, that simply doesn't score goals, doesn't have a prolific goal scorer. And he's doing a lot of decent stuff, and he's coming across very well. The stuff he's saying, I think, is quite good in press conferences. The way he's analysing the performances, the way he's kind of talking about things he wants to do, he really makes a good impression when speaking to journalists, and it comes across very well to supporters who have lapped that up as well, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. He's definitely hit all of the right notes, and impressive first steps, I think, on what's going to be a long journey for Manchester United. But that does conclude part 1 of this episode of the Manchester is Red podcast. Do rejoin us in part 2, where we'll look ahead to Saturday's clash with Nottingham Forest. Welcome back to the second part of this Manchester is Red podcast. Myself, George Smith, and Steven Railston with you. Stephen, you touched on in part 1 about the cameo performance of Lenny Yoro on Wednesday night at the Emirates. Did very, very well indeed. He'll now be hoping to crank up his minutes a little bit further. Do you think he may be in line for a start against Forest on Saturday tea time at Old Trafford, or is it possibly a little bit too soon for him to be thrown straight in from the start?
Yeah, it might come too soon. I think Amrim's kind of preached caution, hasn't he, and said he'll continue to be handled carefully. But Lissandro Martinez will be back in the squad. Obviously, he served the 1 match suspension against Arsenal alongside Kobe Mainoo, who will also be available again. So with that in mind, Yoro probably starting the bench, I would imagine. You've got Maguire, Delay, Mazwari, obviously, and Martinez in contention there. So I'd probably expect to not make the lineup, but it'd be great to see him again off the bench. Like I said in the first part, really classy cameo. I thought did a lot of good stuff. obviously the night before the Arsenal game, it's confirmed that Luke Shaw was going to be out for a few weeks as well. He wasn't spotted, as we reported, going down to London with the squad on the Tuesday afternoon, travelling down on the train, which suggested that he might not be available. He came out and released a statement and confirmed it. And it's just getting to the point now with Shaw, and it's just not. It's sad to see. I guess it's sad to see. I do feel sorry for him. I know there's not a lot of kind of empathy towards him because he went to the Euros in the summer, and he hadn't started for United since February the 18th against Luton when he picked up an injury. But I guess it's not the player wants to be fit. It's the bottom line, and his body's it's just breaking down. He can't do what he wants, and it's a shame because Luke Shaw is a supremely talented player when he's fit, one of the best left backs in the country. In Europe, and he's fantastic centre half as well, with someone playing that kind of left-sided centre half position, and he excels in that role. He's obviously made a few substitute appearances since returning back to fitness, but he's now picked up a hamstring injury, and it's getting to the point now where the club are probably going to have to cut the losses. Like I say, he's fantastic when he's fit, but he's not fit enough, and that's the bottom line. He's had these injury issues since he joined from Southampton in 2014. He's had a really rough time of things. Obviously the leg break, that was really bad, but there's been these muscle injuries that have crept in more recently, which has been a big issue for sure. And it's obvious, isn't it? His body can't really handle the load of playing for United. So yeah, left back's obviously a priority in the summer, and it'd be interesting to see who starts in that role against Nottingham Forest.
Yeah, it certainly will be. And myself and Samuel touched on Luke Shaw on Monday's podcast, obviously a day before we found out that he'd picked up a fresh injury, sort of saying he was tailor-made for the left centre-half role in Martinez's absence on Wednesday night. And then obviously the statement comes out on Tuesday evening. And you do have to feel sorry for Luke Shaw. I agree with you. When you're a footballer, you only get one football career. You don't want to be spending months and months out on the sidelines. And I already sort of fear, is it going to result in early retirement for Luke Shaw? That's my biggest fear for him, because we've seen the amount of players who have obviously had to call time on their playing careers ahead of schedule. So hopefully he can get back and overcome this latest setback. But Lisandro Martinez, as you mentioned, Stephen, is going to be back for Saturday's game against Forest. Koy Mainu as well will be back available. Both served a one-match suspension in midweek at the Emirates. Do both of them walk straight back into the 11 for you?
Martinez does. I'd probably start Mainu as well, but whether he actually does walk back into the team is another matter. Made his first appearance, obviously against Everton, did quite well, played longer than was originally planned. Amram said in his press conference they were obviously just wanting to manage his load and his minutes. He returned to training on the second Monday after the international break, so I thought he'd have enough time and kind of minutes or training in the bank, I should say, to kind of play a full game. But clearly Mainu wasn't far as long as we thought he was in his recovery. So it'll be interesting to see if he starts. I think he probably will. Whether he partners Ugarte or Casemiro in the centre. I think everyone thought Mainu and Ugarte would be the logical choice for Amram. I think that was seen as the pairing that would kind of define his tenure for this season. Would see them in the middle, but we've not really seen them together too much yet. And Casemiro's still got a role to play, of course. So whether he goes for him, I'm not quite sure. Who would you go for in midfield on Saturday?
I think when you take into account the rotation policy that Ruben Amorim is setting, I would possibly be looking at Casemiro and Koy Mainu as a pairing. Ugarte and Fernandes obviously played together as the two deeper midfielders on Wednesday night. It was the third different midfield pairing that Amorim had unleashed in 4 different games. So he's going to rotate again, you would think, but I would like to see Mainu come back in, having had, what will it have been, nearly a full week since he last played. I think he's going to be fit and sharp enough. My
one concern with Mainu, I guess, and I mean, Amorim described him as one of the best youngsters in the league in his interview before Everton. And he's you know my opinion of him. I think I rate him so highly, but does he have the legs to kind of really succeed and excel in this system? Amorim really likes players who are really intense, who can really put the yards in. I believe Mainu can succeed, but that will be one to watch kind of going forward to see how he's used and where Amorim plays him. He's actually better in more advanced midfield roles. He's not a number 6. I think he's been wrongly pigeonholed by some in the media who haven't really watched Mainu. They might watch him in one game and believe he's kind of a deep number 6 midfielder, but he's not. He's more of a number 8, I'd say. He's better in prominent positions. When you think back to the last season, think that goal he scored against Wolves when he danced through. I'd love to see more of that for the remainder of the season, but we'll see. Mason Mount, I expect to start on the bench after getting his chance against Arsenal. I know you said he did well and he ran, and he did. I think that's why Mount is popular with coaches and maybe not fans, because he does a lot of stuff out of possession that goes unnoticed. But he does work his socks off. I know it's a cliche, but he does. And he puts in a lot of work. I imagine at the end of games and in training, because they have the running stats from training sessions, he's probably at the top of most sessions, I would imagine, because that's what your eye tells you when you watch Mason Mount from his performances.
Yeah, he is a workaholic, but like you said, probably after having started on Wednesday night, he's probably going to make way in one of those three attacking positions. And obviously, we've mentioned about the midfield's being rotated quite a lot, certainly the central pairing. The front three could be rotated again this weekend. Does Joshua Zirkzee come back into the 11 for you, Marcus Rashford, as well?
Not for me, Zirkzee. Yeah, I've put Rashford in. I mean, we've talked about kind of Zirkzee chapter and verse, haven't we? I still believe we should all give him the season. I think you should give a player the kind of the benefit of the doubt, but I completely get Samuel's case where he says, look, they should have to just get rid of him in the summer, because if they want to sign another striker, they have to just admit they got Zirkzee wrong. I completely understand that. He's not a natural goal scorer, isn't he? I mean, having said that, his brace against Everton, both of those goals were brilliantly taken. They were really good finishes, to be fair to him. And the first one was on his left foot, wasn't it, at the Stretford end? So he took those really well, but he's not a natural goal scorer. And it was a surprise to see Rashford dropped on Wednesday, because he likes a goal against Arsenal. And I think Arsenal fans were probably happy to see the lineup when that was confirmed. Rashford didn't do much when he came on. He obviously conceded the corner, didn't he? I think that was probably overplayed. He got some stick for that, but that can happen anytime. A player conceding the corner. It's on United to defend it properly when that happens. So I wouldn't give him too much stick for that. But yeah, I'd expect Rashford to come into the team on Saturday afternoon.
Well, 6 has obviously been the magic number for Ruben Amorim. He's made 6 changes for each of the 3 following games from his first in the last couple of weeks. So 6 again could be the safe bet for Saturday. So possibly it will be a rotated front 3 again, possibly Fernandes and Rashford, maybe with Zirkzee. Højlund, obviously he didn't get a lot of service on Wednesday night, and that's no fault of his own at all. But you need to find a way to get him going again in the league. He's only scored once in the Premier League so far this season, the goal against Brentford back in October. If he is to be Amorim's number 9, certainly for the rest of this season at the very least, you've got to find a way to get his confidence up. And to be fair to him, obviously he got 2 goals against Bodo Glimt, but didn't feature against Everton, came back in against Arsenal. Always going to be a tough test. But Forest at home, who to their credit have been doing very well this season, he's certainly a good opportunity, you would think, for Rasmus Højlund to get back among the goals.
Yeah, his performance in the Europa League felt like the turning point, didn't it? I believe it felt like, right, come on then, Højlund's going to kick on now and really start scoring goals again. Last season, when he scored his brace against Aston Villa, I mean, it took him ages to score his first goal in the Premier League, but when that came, he really hit a purple patch, a really good spell. Scored 7 goals in 6 games in between January to February, and then when he picked up the injury against Luton, the same game that Shaw got injured, United started to lose games, which was no coincidence, and the season kind of tailed off a bit before picking back up, obviously, in the FA Cup final. But I think, look, strikers are streaky creatures. Like, form and confidence is such a big thing in elite sport. We all know that. And when Højlund has his rhythm, when he's scoring goals, he's a different beast. And I think he is turning a corner. You can't judge him on that performance at the Emirates. United offered nothing going forward. Like I say, he had a thankless task, working that line, doing the donkey work, putting the hard yards in. So, look, if he starts, he'll probably take his chance. I guess it depends on how Amorim thinks Nottingham Forest will set up, because he talked about that after Everton. And it was actually quite clever, saying that, look, Everton probably would have preferred Højlund to start with their style. So we played Zirkzee, and that gave them a few more headaches on the day. So, look, Amorim will analyse Nottingham Forest, who are enjoying a very good season, but they head into the game, obviously, after being hammered 3-0 by Manchester City at the Etihad. So there's question marks over their form the last few weeks. They've kind of dropped off a little bit. I watched the highlights of their game against Ipswich. They obviously beat Ipswich 1-0 at City Ground before facing City, and Ipswich had a decent time of things as well. That was a very tight game. So this should be a game that this is a game United should be winning, of course. It's Forest, without being disrespectful, because they are having a decent season.
And you say should very loosely there, I notice. We know what United are like. They can obviously.
Well, I'll make that point all the time. Yeah, I know it sounds disrespectful, but when you're playing the likes of Forest at home, United should be winning these games.
They should be, and you've sort of set me up for my next point, which I was going to talk about next. And when you look at United's home form of the last sort of 8 weeks or so, they've won 6 of the last 7 at Old Trafford. They've put a bit of a run together at home. They've got a bit of momentum going since that 3-0 defeat to Spurs at the end of September. Forest, as you've mentioned, they've been a little bit up and down lately. They lost 3-0 at Arsenal, 3-0 to City, 3-1 at home to Newcastle. So they've come unstuck against the teams you would expect to be finishing above them in the table. For United, their home form is going to be key to their chance of finishing the top 4 this season. As you said there, it's a game that they've really got to be winning. However they do it, they've got to get 3 points from this one.
I'm just looking at the table now. At the start of the season, if you'd said Fulham, Nottingham Forest, Bournemouth would all be above United, you'd probably not believe it, even though everyone kind of probably feared the worst with Erik ten Hag in charge. I think we could all see what was coming. But 13th still in the league. It's just so tight in that table. I mean, you look at 5th, Brighton are on 23 points and United are on 19. So if they do string a run of results, there's such potential. I mean, you can easily climb into the top 6 and around the European places, which I expect will finish around 5th or 6th or around that kind of area. I expect Forest to drop off a little bit more. They've obviously made a very good start, but they've got some brilliant players. Espirito Santo's done a very good job since taking over. He's carried on and picked up the baton from Steve Cooper, of course, and done very well. So fair play to him. And we might see the return of Anthony Alanya as well. Obviously left the club in 2023. He's had a very good time of things with Forest, established himself as a Premier League player. I'm just writing a piece about that, actually, when you think back to the 2021-22 season. It was a train wreck for United. Absolutely terrible. Bleak season. Sacked Solskjaer. Hired Ralph Rangnick, of course, on an interim basis. But on an individual sense for Alanya, it was a brilliant, like he'll look back on that and think what a season it was, because it was his only good season at United. His role was kind of very, very greatly reduced in the next campaign. You think he only played 700 minutes or something like that. It was Rangnick's legacy, really, and he performed really well. 8 goals. That game against Atletico Madrid in the Champions League, when he opened the scoring within 10 minutes, and there's obviously that brilliant chant that was sung a lot at that time. Rhythm is a dancer. So look, it'd be great to see him back at Old Trafford, and he'll be hopeful of proving a few people wrong.
I've got that chant buzzing around in my head for weeks when he was on the scene doing that. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting test for United, this one, ultimately. Forest, they're going to want to bounce back after losing to City on Wednesday night. But Forest, of course, they've beaten Liverpool already away from home this season. They're not going to arrive at Old Trafford shaking in their skin. They're going to be up for this, and they're going to be determined to get 3 points. So it's important United don't let the guard down.
Yeah, of course. I mean, you have to give any Premier League team respect, don't you? When you look at the fixture list, if you're Forest, going to the Etihad and then Old Trafford isn't ideal in consecutive games. I know Old Trafford does not have the kind of aura or the kind of it doesn't intimidate opponents like it used to, but it's still a very difficult place to go. And as you've said, the home form's been pretty decent in the last few weeks. So yeah, you look, United can take positives from that first half performance against Arsenal, where they defended well. But we need to see a lot more attacking threat on Saturday against Forest, and I think they'll deliver that.
Yeah, you would certainly like to think so. It's 3 Premier League home wins in a row that United will be going in search of, and be the first time they've done that this season, of course, if they manage to achieve that. So fingers crossed for Saturday. Hopefully the Reds can get back on track and put that defeat to Arsenal behind them swiftly. And that does bring a close this episode of the Manchester is Red podcast. A big thank you to listening or watching us on this episode. We'll be back again next week to review the clash with Forest and look ahead to the return of the Europa League and more football for United as December's schedule intensifies. So do take care, and we'll catch you again very soon.